Imagine a freezing night hundreds of years ago. No heaters, no fireplaces, no blankets as we know them. Village families huddled together on straw beds, wrapped in layers of wool and fur. Small embers, heated stones, or a tiny fire gave just enough warmth. Every person, every animal, even the walls themselves helped trap heat. Hot porridge fueled the body, and stories, songs, and rituals kept spirits alive. From Europe to Asia to Africa, people survived the cold through clever homes, layered clothing, shared sleep, and resourcefulness. Long before modern heating, warmth was a system built on cooperation, ingenuity, and tradition. The cold nights of the ancient world, long before modern heating systems, electric blankets, insulated walls, or even proper chimneys, village families faced long, bitter nights with limited protection from the cold. For many of them, a fireplace as we imagine it today simply did not exist. Yet they survived winter after winter. Their survival depended not on comfort, but on creativity, shared warmth, and a deep understanding of their environment. To understand how families stayed warm, we must first imagine the kind of homes they lived in. In many ancient and medieval villages, houses were small, built from mud, clay, wood, straw, or stone. The structure itself played a crucial role in retaining warmth. Thick earthen walls acted as natural insulation. During the day, these walls absorbed heat from the sun. At night, they slowly released that stored warmth back into the room. This simple principle, known today as thermal mass, helped reduce extreme temperature changes inside the house. Roofs were often made from thatch, tightly packed straw or reeds layered thickly. While thatch may look fragile, when properly built it provided surprisingly effective insulation. Air trapped between the layers of straw reduced heat loss. The smaller and lower the house, the easier it was to keep warm. High ceilings, which are common in modern homes, would have been a disadvantage because heat rises. Village homes often had low ceilings, so warmth would stay closer to where people slept. In the earliest villages, many homes did not have fireplaces in the modern sense. Instead, they had central hearths. A hearth was simply a fire built on the ground in the center of the room. There was usually no chimney. Smoke escaped through a small hole in the roof or through the doorway. Although smoky and unpleasant by modern standards, this setup allowed heat to spread evenly throughout the room. The fire warmed the air, the walls, and even the packed earth floor. However, fires were not always kept burning all night. Firewood was precious. Gathering wood required time and effort, especially in regions where forests were scarce. Families often allowed the fire to burn down before sleeping. Instead of maintaining flames, they relied on hot embers. These glowing coals produced steady heat for hours without consuming much fuel. Ash was sometimes spread over the embers to slow the burning process, preserving warmth until morning. Sleeping arrangements were one of the most important strategies for surviving cold nights. Unlike modern families, villagers rarely slept alone in separate rooms. Entire families often slept in the same space. Body heat was a powerful source of warmth. When several people slept close together, covered under shared blankets or animal skins, they created a pocket of trapped heat. Children might sleep between adults for extra warmth. In some cultures, even servants or extended family members shared the same sleeping platform. Beds themselves were designed to fight the cold. Instead of elevated wooden frames with mattresses as we know them, early beds were often simple straw-filled sacks placed on wooden platforms or raised slightly above the ground. Raising the bed helped avoid the coldest air, which settled near the floor. Straw was an effective insulator because it trapped air. Animal furs and wool blankets were layered on top. Wool, especially, retains warmth even when slightly damp. In extremely cold regions, families took even more dramatic measures. In some northern villages, livestock were brought inside the house during winter nights. While this may seem uncomfortable, animals generate a significant amount of body heat. Cows, goats, and sheep, kept on the lower level of a home, could warm the entire structure. The rising heat from the animals below made the upper sleeping area more bearable. This practice was common in parts of Europe and Asia for centuries. Clothing also played a crucial role. People did not change into thin nightwear. Instead, they slept in heavy garments made of wool or linen. Layers were essential. Wool tunics, cloaks, head coverings, and thick socks remained on through the night. Covering the head was especially important because a great deal of heat escapes from it. Even simple cloth caps helped preserve warmth. Another important factor was timing. Village life followed the rhythm of the sun. In winter, people often went to bed shortly after sunset. By sleeping during the coldest hours and waking before dawn to relight the fire, they minimized exposure to freezing air. Some communities practiced what historians call segmented sleep. Families slept for a few hours, woke in the middle of the night to tend the embers or add fuel, and then returned to sleep. This pattern ensured the fire did not completely die out. In warmer climates, where fireplaces were less common, architectural design became even more important. Homes were built partially underground or against hillsides to reduce exposure to wind. The earth surrounding the structure provided natural insulation. In desert regions, thick adobe walls kept interiors relatively stable in temperature, protecting against both daytime heat and nighttime cold. Wind protection was another key strategy. Doors were often covered with heavy cloth or animal hides at night to block drafts. Windows, if they existed at all, were small and sometimes covered with wooden shutters. Glass was rare and expensive in many historical periods, so openings were minimized. Reducing airflow meant retaining whatever warmth had been gathered during the day. Communal life also mattered. In many villages, people did not isolate themselves in separate houses during the harshest weather. Storytelling, spinning wool, mending tools, and preparing food were often done in shared indoor spaces during the evening. By the time night arrived, the room had been warmed by cooking fires, oil lamps, and human activity. Even the simple act of gathering together increased the overall temperature inside. It is important to remember that what we consider unbearably cold today was often normal for them. Generations grew accustomed to cooler indoor temperatures. Their bodies adapted to a lifestyle without constant artificial heating. Hard physical labor during the day increased circulation and internal warmth, which helped them tolerate lower temperatures at night. Village families survived without fireplaces, not because they had advanced technology, but because they used every resource available to them. They understood their homes, their animals, their clothing, and their communities as parts of a single survival system. Warmth was not created by one device. It was built through cooperation, planning, and adaptation. This was only the beginning of humanity's long struggle against the cold. In the next part, we will explore how different regions of the world developed unique heating traditions, from underground heating systems to heated stones placed inside beds. Heated stones, hidden heat, and underground warmth. While many early villages relied on simple hearths and shared body heat, different cultures across the world developed remarkably creative solutions for staying warm at night. Not every community had access to large amounts of firewood. Not every house was built the same way. Climate, geography, and available materials shaped how families protected themselves from freezing temperatures. Some of the most fascinating heating methods were invisible from the outside. One of the most ingenious systems in history was the Roman hypocaust. In the cities and villas of the Roman Empire, wealthy households and bathhouses used an early form of central heating. A furnace outside the main living area pushed hot air under raised floors supported by small pillars. The heat traveled through hollow spaces in the walls before escaping through vents. Although this technology was more common in urban and elite settings, the idea of warming a structure from below influenced later rural heating systems across Europe and Asia. The principle was simple: heat rises. If warmth began under the floor, it spread more evenly throughout the room. In East Asia, A similar but independently developed system became central to village life. In Korea, the traditional ondol heating system transformed how homes were built. Beneath the floor, smoke and heat from a kitchen fire traveled through horizontal flues before exiting through a chimney. The stone floor absorbed the heat and radiated it slowly throughout the night. Families slept directly on these warmed floors, using mats and blankets. This system made it possible to stay comfortable without maintaining an open flame overnight. The ondol design was so efficient that variations of it are still used in modern Korean homes today. In northern China, especially during imperial periods such as the Han Dynasty, families used heated brick platforms known as kang. These raised beds were connected to the cooking stove. When meals were prepared, heat traveled through internal channels beneath the platform. At night, the stored warmth made sleeping far more bearable. The kang became the center of domestic life. People ate, worked, and slept on it during winter months. Heated stones were another widespread solution. In many regions, villagers placed stones near the evening fire until they became hot. Before sleeping, the stones were wrapped in cloth or placed inside containers and carried into beds. The slow release of heat from the stone provided warmth for several hours. This method was common in parts of Europe and Scandinavia. In medieval England, people sometimes used ceramic bed warmers filled with hot embers. These devices were slid between sheets before bedtime to chase away the chill. In Japan, portable heating devices called hibachi became common during the time of the Edo period. A hibachi was a small container filled with charcoal. While not designed to heat entire rooms, it provided localized warmth. Families gathered around it, warming their hands and feet before sleep. Charcoal burned steadily and produced less smoke than raw wood, making it more suitable for enclosed spaces. In Arctic and subarctic regions, such as among indigenous communities of North America and Siberia, heating methods depended on survival in extreme cold. Some groups built semi-subterranean homes. By digging partially into the earth, they reduced exposure to wind and freezing air. The ground itself acted as insulation. Small oil lamps, fueled by animal fat, provided both light and a surprising amount of heat. In tightly constructed spaces, even a modest flame could raise the temperature significantly. In parts of medieval Europe, especially in alpine villages, houses were designed with stone lower levels and wooden upper levels. The ground floor often housed animals, while the family slept above. The animals' body heat naturally warmed the floorboards. This arrangement was practical and efficient. Although it blurred the boundary between human and animal space, it made winter survival possible. Another clever clever method involved storing heat in water. Water retains heat longer than air. In some communities, large pots of hot water were placed inside sleeping areas before bedtime. As the water slowly cooled, it released warmth into the room. This was a simple but effective way to extend the benefits of an evening fire without continuously feeding it. Curtains and enclosed sleeping spaces also played a critical role. Even if a house had only one room, beds were sometimes surrounded by heavy fabric curtains. These created a small enclosed microclimate. Once body heat built up inside the enclosed bed space, the temperature remained significantly warmer than the rest of the room. Four-poster beds with thick drapes in medieval Europe were not merely decorative. They were practical defenses against drafts. Fuel type made a major difference as well. In regions with limited forests, people turned to peat, dried animal dung, or coal. Peat, cut from bogs and dried, burned slowly and steadily. In Ireland and parts of Scotland, peat fires became central to village life. Dried dung was widely used in Central Asia and parts of the Middle East where wood was scarce. Though less efficient than hardwood, these fuels provided essential warmth during long winters. The design of clothing inside the home cannot be overlooked. Nighttime garments were often layered and heavy. In colder climates, people wore wool caps to bed. Thick socks, sometimes made from felted wool, insulated the feet. Since extremities lose heat quickly, keeping hands and feet covered dramatically improved overall comfort. Importantly, families carefully managed airflow. Even without modern insulation materials, villagers understood that drafts were dangerous. Cracks in walls were sealed with mud or clay. Doors were reinforced with leather strips. Straw or cloth was stuffed into gaps during winter months. These small adjustments prevented warm air from escaping too quickly. Perhaps most impressive is how these methods were often combined. A single village home might include thick earthen walls, a central hearth used mainly for cooking, heated stones placed in beds, heavy blankets, animals below the living quarters, and tightly sealed doorways. Each element alone offered limited protection. Together, they created a sustainable system of warmth. These heating traditions reveal an important truth. Innovation does not always require advanced machinery. Many of these systems were based on simple physical principles. Heat rises, stone stores warmth, earth insulates, bodies generate energy. Village families may not have understood these principles in scientific language, but through experience, they mastered them. Smoke, soot, and the danger of fire. Keeping warm without a modern fireplace was not only uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Fire was both a gift and a threat. Village families depended on it for cooking, light, and heat. Yet a single mistake could destroy an entire home. In tightly packed villages, one burning house could quickly become many. In early medieval Europe, especially after the fall of the Roman Empire, many rural homes returned to simpler heating methods. Central hearths were common again. These were open fires built directly on a flat stone surface or packed earth floor. There were no proper chimneys. Smoke rose upward and slowly filtered out through thatched roofs or small openings near the ceiling. Over time, the inside of these houses became darkened with soot. Walls, beams, and ceilings turned black. Although smoky interiors sound unpleasant, the smoke had an unexpected benefit. It helped preserve wooden beams and thatched roofs by discouraging insects and slowing rot. The smoke also dried out the interior structure, reducing moisture that could weaken the building. Still, breathing smoke daily came at a cost. Eye irritation and lung problems were common, even if people did not understand the medical reasons. Eventually, improvements appeared. By the high Middle Ages, chimneys began spreading through European villages. Instead of smoke filling the entire room, a hood above the hearth directed it upward through a vertical shaft. This simple architectural change dramatically improved indoor air quality. Houses became cleaner and slightly safer. However, chimneys were expensive to build. Poor families often continued using open hearths for generations. Fire safety required constant attention. Before sleeping, families carefully managed embers. Large flames were rarely left burning unattended. Instead, hot coals were gathered together and sometimes covered lightly with ash to slow combustion. This allowed the fire to remain alive without active flames that might spread. In the morning, the embers could be stirred and fed with fresh fuel. In some regions, night watch practices developed. In tightly clustered villages, especially those built of wood, certain individuals were responsible for watching for signs of fire. Bells were sometimes installed in church towers to warn of emergencies. Churches themselves, such as those common across medieval Europe, often stood at the center of the village and acted as both spiritual and practical gathering points during crises. In northern climates, the challenge was even greater. During periods like the so-called Little Ice Age, winters grew harsher across parts of Europe. Though not a formal ice age, temperatures dropped enough to shorten growing seasons and increase fuel demand. Families needed more wood, peat, or coal than before. Managing these resources became critical. Firewood was stacked carefully and kept dry under cover. Wet wood produced excessive smoke and less heat, making indoor conditions worse. Beyond Europe, other regions faced similar struggles with smoke management. In parts of Central Asia, nomadic groups such as the Mongols used portable felt tents known as jurs or yurts. A small stove or hearth stood in the center. A circular opening at the top allowed smoke to escape. The design created natural ventilation while preserving warmth. The curved walls helped circulate heat evenly inside the tent. In the Middle East and parts of North Africa, many homes were built around central courtyards. During winter, families gathered in the smallest enclosed rooms to conserve heat. Braziers filled with charcoal provided warmth. Because charcoal burns more steadily and with less visible smoke than raw wood, it was often preferred indoors. However, charcoal carried its own risk. In poorly ventilated spaces, carbon monoxide could build up silently. People did not understand the science, but they knew that sleeping too close to certain fires could be deadly. Managing fuel was not only about warmth, but also about survival planning. In forested regions, wood gathering was a daily task. Children and elderly family members often participated in collecting small branches. In treeless areas, dried animal dung became essential. In parts of Central Asia and the Arabian Peninsula, dried dung patties were carefully shaped and left in the sun to harden. Though humble, this fuel burned long enough to warm small enclosed spaces overnight. The position of the hearth inside the house also mattered. Many homes were designed with the hearth at the center of family life. It was where meals were cooked, stories were told, and tools were repaired. The warmth created a natural gathering space. Even when no active flames were present, the stone base of the hearth retained heat for some time after cooking. Sleeping habits adapted to fire management. Families often arranged beds at a safe distance from open flames, but close enough to benefit from residual warmth. In some cases, wooden bed frames were avoided near hearths to reduce fire risk. Instead, straw pallets could be moved easily if sparks spread. Fire starting techniques were carefully preserved knowledge. Flint and steel friction methods and later simple tinderboxes ensured that embers could be reignited quickly. Losing a fire entirely during winter could be catastrophic, especially during storms when gathering fresh fuel was difficult. Some communities shared embers between households, reinforcing cooperation among neighbors. As chimney technology improved, homes gradually changed shape. Multi-room houses became more common in wealthier villages. Fireplaces were built into walls rather than placed centrally. This allowed smoke to exit more efficiently, but also concentrated heat in one area. Families adapted by gathering in that specific room during cold nights. Despite all improvements, the balance between warmth and safety remained delicate. Entire medieval towns were occasionally destroyed by fire. Rebuilding required immense labor. Yet people continued relying on open flames because no alternative existed. The story of warmth in village life is therefore not only about comfort. It is about risk, adaptation, and shared responsibility. Every glowing ember represented both protection from the cold and the possibility of disaster. Families lived with that tension daily. Wool, fur, and the power of textiles. Long before insulated walls and controlled heating systems, the true defense against freezing nights was not the building itself, but what people wrapped around their bodies. Textiles changed everything. The development of spinning, weaving, and animal domestication transformed how village families survived winter. In many regions, warmth did not come from the fire. It came from fabric, one of the most important breakthroughs in human history was the domestication of sheep. As early agricultural societies developed in places like Mesopotamia, people realized that sheep provided more than meat and milk. Their wool could be spun into thread and woven into cloth. Wool had remarkable properties. Its fibers trapped air, and trapped air is what holds heat. Even when damp, wool retained much of its insulating ability. This made it ideal for cold, humid climates. In medieval Europe, wool production became the backbone of many village economies. Regions in England, Flanders, and parts of Italy thrived on wool trade. But in small villages, wool was not luxury export material. It was survival. Women and children spent long evenings carding, spinning, and weaving wool into blankets, cloaks, and stockings. Every household aimed to produce enough thick fabric to endure the winter. Layering was essential. Instead of a single thick blanket, families often used multiple layers. Linen sheets might be placed closest to the skin because linen absorbed moisture and felt smoother. On top of that came wool blankets and sometimes animal furs. Each added layer trapped more air and reduced heat loss. The goal was to create a barrier that captured body warmth and prevented it from escaping into the cold night air. In colder northern regions, fur played an even greater role. Among Scandinavian communities and northern Slavic villages, animal pelts from deer, foxes, and bears were used extensively. The fur side was turned inward for maximum insulation. Fur functioned similarly to wool, but with even greater heat retention. In places influenced by Viking culture, such as areas under the reach of the Viking Age, thick fur-lined cloaks were common sleeping garments. Beds themselves were carefully constructed for insulation. Instead of soft spring mattresses, people used straw-filled ticks, essentially large fabric sacks stuffed with straw or hay. Straw might seem uncomfortable today, but it served an important function. It trapped air between its hollow stems. These air pockets slowed heat transfer, helping sleepers stay warmer than if they had lain directly on the ground. The placement of the bed was also strategic. In many medieval homes, beds were positioned against interior walls rather than outer walls. Exterior walls were colder because they were directly exposed to wind and frost. By placing beds against inner walls or near the hearth, families reduced heat loss. Curtained beds became popular in parts of medieval Europe. Heavy fabric drapes hung around the sleeping area, forming a small enclosed space. Once body heat filled this enclosed area, the temperature inside could be noticeably warmer than the rest of the room. For wealthier households, these bed curtains were thick wool or even velvet. For poorer villagers, simpler cloth served the same purpose. In Central Asia, nomadic groups such as the Mongols relied heavily on felt. Felt was made by matting and compressing wool fibers together. It created dense, wind-resistant material ideal for tents and bedding. Inside a felt yurt, thick felt rugs and blankets lined the floors and walls. These layers provided insulation against the harsh steppe winters. Clothing at night was just as important as bedding. Unlike modern habits of wearing light sleepwear, villagers typically slept in the same heavy garments worn during the day. Wool tunics, leggings, and even belts might remain on. In colder regions, people wore nightcaps. Covering the head significantly reduced heat loss. Thick wool socks or foot wrappings kept extremities warm, since hands and feet cool quickly. Another valuable textile material was flax, used to produce linen. Linen alone was not as warm as wool, but it was useful as a base layer. In regions around the Mediterranean, such as rural communities influenced by the Byzantine Empire, layered linen and wool garments allowed families to adjust to fluctuating temperatures. Blankets were treated with care and maintained carefully. They were aired out during sunny winter days to remove moisture. Damp fabric loses insulating ability, so drying textiles was essential. In some villages, blankets were even warmed briefly near the hearth before bedtime. The value of textiles was so great that blankets were often listed in wills and inheritance records. A thick wool blanket could represent months of labor. Losing one to fire, rot, or theft was a serious hardship. In some societies, newly married couples were gifted blankets as part of their dowry because they symbolized security and protection. Children were especially protected with extra wrapping. Bobbies were swaddled tightly in layers of cloth. Swaddling limited movement, but conserved body heat. Small children sometimes slept between adults to benefit from shared warmth. Textile production shaped the rhythm of village evenings. After sunset, when outdoor work ended, families gathered indoors to spin wool by firelight. This was not only practical, but social. Stories, songs, and traditions were passed down while hands worked steadily. The result of this labor was the warmth that carried them through the night. The story of warmth in village life cannot be separated from the story of cloth. Fire provided immediate heat, but textiles preserved it. Without wool, fur, and layered bedding, even the strongest hearth would not have been enough. Earth, stone, and the shape of warmth. As village communities matured across different regions of the world, families realized that survival in winter depended not only on fire or fabric, but on the very shape and placement of their homes. Architecture became a silent shield against the cold. Long before insulation foam or central heating, people designed houses that worked with nature rather than against it. One of the oldest and most effective strategies was building partially underground. In many ancient settlements, including those in Anatolia, early agricultural communities dug homes into hillsides or flat ground. The earth surrounding the walls acted as insulation. Soil maintains a relatively stable temperature compared to open air. During freezing nights, underground sections of the home remained significantly warmer than the outside air. Even a shallow excavation reduced wind exposure and heat loss. In the British Isles, Iron Age communities constructed roundhouses with thick walls made of wattle and daub. Wooden frames were woven with branches and coated with mud and clay. These walls were much thicker than modern interior walls. Thickness mattered. The more material between the inside and outside, the slower heat escaped. The conical thatched roof allowed smoke to rise and drift out gently while retaining most of the warmth below. Stone villages across the Alps and other mountainous regions developed another strategy. Stone absorbs heat slowly, but releases it gradually. During the day, sunlight warmed the stone walls. At night, that stored heat radiated back into the interior. In regions influenced by the legacy of the Roman Empire, stone construction techniques continued long after imperial rule ended, benefiting rural communities. Compact design was equally important. Small rooms are easier to heat than large halls. Many medieval peasant houses consisted of a single main room. Instead of spreading warmth across multiple chambers, families concentrated their activity in one enclosed space. During especially harsh weather, interior partitions might even be temporarily sealed to reduce the heated area further. In Eastern Europe and parts of Russia, log houses became common. Thick wooden logs stacked tightly together formed strong insulating walls. Moss, clay, or straw was stuffed into gaps between logs to block drafts. Wood naturally traps small pockets of air within its fibers, making it a better insulator than bare stone. These log homes were particularly effective in snowy climates, in desert regions, where nights could become surprisingly cold despite hot days. Thick adobe walls were the solution. In rural areas influenced by early Islamic architecture during periods such as the Abbasid Caliphate, mudbrick homes were common. Adobe bricks, made from clay mixed with straw and dried in the sun, were heavy and dense. They absorbed heat during daylight and slowly released it overnight. This balanced both extreme daytime heat and nighttime chill. Wind direction also shaped village layout. In colder climates, houses were often built close together, forming narrow streets. This clustering reduced wind exposure. Each building acted as a barrier for the next. Villages were sometimes positioned behind natural windbreaks, such as hills, forests, or rock formations. Door placement mattered. Many homes had low doorways. While inconvenient for tall adults, smaller openings reduced heat loss. Every time a door opened, warm air escaped. A smaller door meant less air exchange. In some regions, entryways included a small enclosed passage before the main room, creating a buffer zone against drafts. Roof design played a crucial role as well. Thatched roofs, when thickly layered, provided excellent insulation. In snowy regions, steeply sloped roofs prevented heavy snow accumulation. Snow itself, interestingly, can act as insulation. A layer of snow on the roof helped trap heat inside, much like an insulating blanket. Flooring was another overlooked element. Packed earth floors were common in many early villages. Although cold to the touch, earth floors connected directly to the relatively stable ground temperature below. In some areas, wooden planks were added above the earth to create a small air gap, improving insulation. Communal winter houses existed in certain cultures. Among some indigenous communities in North America, larger shared structures were built specifically for colder months. By concentrating many people into one building, collective body heat significantly raised interior temperatures. The principle was simple but powerful. More people meant more warmth. Even ancient urban planning influenced rural warmth. In parts of China during and after the Han Dynasty, courtyard homes were arranged to shield interior spaces from harsh northern winds. Outer walls acted as protective barriers, while the inner courtyard allowed controlled sunlight exposure. Seasonal adaptation was common. Some families had lighter summer dwellings and sturdier winter homes. In mountainous or nomadic regions, people migrated between seasonal shelters designed specifically for temperature differences. All of these architectural strategies shared one goal: reduce the need for constant fire. Fuel was labor-intensive to gather. By designing homes that naturally retained heat, village families conserved precious resources. The house itself became a tool of survival. Walls, roofs, floors, and doorways were carefully shaped by generations of experience. Every beam and brick reflected practical knowledge passed down over centuries: food, firelight, and internal warmth. When we think about staying warm at night, we often imagine blankets, walls, or fire. But village families understood something equally important. Warmth begins inside the body. The human body produces heat through digestion and physical activity. For rural communities living without fireplaces or constant flames, food itself became a source of nighttime survival. During winter months, diets changed noticeably. In many agricultural villages across Europe, especially during the medieval period, meals became heavier and richer as temperatures dropped. Porridges made from oats or barley were common in colder regions. These grains provided slow-burning energy, meaning the body continued producing heat for hours after eating. A large bowl of thick porridge before sleep was not just filling, it was protective. In Northern Europe, root vegetables like turnips, carrots, and parsnips were winter staples. They stored well underground and could be boiled into stews. Stew was especially valuable because it was cooked slowly over embers, absorbing maximum heat while conserving fuel. The steam from cooking also slightly warmed the interior space before bedtime. In regions influenced by the legacy of the Roman Empire, bread remained central to winter diets. Dense, coarse bread made from rye or barley required more digestion effort than modern refined bread. That digestion produced body heat. Combined with cheese or salted meat, it created a calorie-rich evening meal. Fat was particularly important. Animal fats contain high energy value. In rural Slavic villages, pork fat was preserved and used generously in cooking during winter. In colder Asian regions during periods such as the Han Dynasty, families relied on warming soups made with meat broth. Hot liquids warmed the body immediately and helped maintain temperature overnight. Timing of meals mattered as well. Many village families ate their largest meal in the late afternoon or early evening during winter. This ensured digestion occurred during the coldest hours of the night. A well-fed body generated more internal heat than one that went to bed hungry. Hot drinks were another simple but powerful defense against cold. In medieval Europe, warm ale or herbal infusions were common. Alcohol in small amounts created a temporary sensation of warmth by expanding blood vessels near the skin. While it did not truly raise core temperature, it helped people feel more comfortable before sleep. In East Asia, hot teas played a similar role. In regions under the influence of the Edo period, families often gathered around small charcoal braziers while drinking warm tea, combining internal and external warmth. Even spices had significance. In wealthier households, spices like pepper or cinnamon were believed to heat the body. Though expensive and rare for peasants, small amounts sometimes reached rural markets through trade routes. Physical labor also contributed. Winter did not eliminate work. Chopping wood, tending animals, repairing tools, and clearing snow kept blood circulating. When families entered their homes at night after hours of labor, their bodies were already warm from exertion. That warmth, trapped under layers of wool and blankets, lasted into the night. Evening routines were structured carefully. After cooking, families did not immediately extinguish the hearth. They used the residual heat for tasks like drying clothes, warming bedding, or heating stones for bed warmers. This ensured that the warmth generated for food preparation was fully utilized before sleep. Salted and preserved foods also played a role in survival. During harsh winters, fresh produce was limited. Villagers depended on foods stored in autumn. Proper nutrition prevented weakness, which made cold more dangerous. A malnourished body loses heat faster. In some pastoral communities, especially among groups like the Mongols, dairy products such as fermented milk and dried curds were vital winter staples. These high-energy foods provided sustained warmth in harsh steppe climates. Communal meals strengthened survival chances. Eating together meant sharing limited resources wisely. No one family member was left without nourishment before facing a freezing night. In tightly bonded villages, neighbors sometimes shared surplus food during especially brutal winters. There was also psychological warmth. Sitting close together by firelight, sharing stories, singing songs, and maintaining social bonds reduced stress. Modern science shows that stress can affect how the body regulates temperature. A calm, communal environment may have indirectly supported resilience against cold. Ultimately, warmth at night was not only about architecture or fire, it was about preparation. A full stomach, tired muscles, layered clothing, and carefully managed embers created a system of survival. Each part supported the others. Village life required constant awareness of the seasons. Families did not wait for winter to prepare. Fuel was gathered in autumn. Grain was stored. Textiles were repaired. Roofs were reinforced. When the long nights arrived, survival depended on months of careful planning. Shared sleep, shared survival. For village families living without fireplaces or constant heat, warmth was rarely an individual matter. It was collective. Survival during freezing nights depended not only on architecture, fire, clothing, or food, but on people staying close together. Community itself became a source of heat. In many medieval European villages, entire families slept in the same room. Privacy, as we understand it today, was a luxury few could afford. Parents, children, and sometimes even grandparents shared one enclosed space. This arrangement was practical. The more bodies gathered in one area, the warmer that area became. Human bodies constantly produce heat. In a small, tightly sealed room, that warmth accumulated. Beds were often shared. A single large straw mattress might hold multiple sleepers. Children were placed between adults to benefit from the insulation of larger bodies. In some cases, even hired laborers or extended family members shared the same sleeping platform during winter. What might seem uncomfortable today was normal and necessary. In parts of Scandinavia during and after the Viking Age, longhouses were built to accommodate extended families. These structures were long rectangular buildings where multiple family units lived under one roof. A central hearth ran along the middle. At night, people lay along the walls on raised wooden benches covered with furs and blankets. The combined warmth of many individuals, along with animals sometimes housed at one end, created a surprisingly tolerable indoor climate. Communal winter houses were not limited to Europe. Among certain indigenous communities in North America, large shared dwellings were constructed specifically for colder months. These structures allowed multiple families to gather together when temperatures dropped. The shared fire, combined body heat, and insulated design made winter survival possible. In East Asia, especially in rural areas influenced by systems like the heated floor traditions that developed over centuries, family members often slept together on warmed surfaces. During periods such as the Han Dynasty, heated brick platforms became central gathering and sleeping areas in winter months. Rather than isolating themselves in separate rooms, families maximized the benefit of stored heat by staying close. Social structure played an important role. In agrarian societies, cooperation was essential year-round, but winter strengthened those bonds. Villagers checked on elderly neighbors. If one household ran low on fuel, others might share. In extremely harsh climates, isolation could mean death. Community awareness increased survival rates. Shared work in the evening also contributed to warmth. Before bedtime, families gathered indoors for spinning wool, repairing tools, or preparing food for the next day. These activities kept bodies active and generated heat. By the time they lay down to sleep, both the room and the people inside were warmer. Animals were sometimes part of this shared environment. In many Alpine and Eastern European villages, livestock were kept on the ground floor while families slept above. In other cases, small animals like dogs slept near their owners. Animals contributed additional body heat, and their presence offered psychological comfort as well. The idea of personal bedrooms is relatively modern. For centuries, sleeping was communal. In medieval inns, even strangers sometimes shared beds for warmth. While this practice might feel uncomfortable today, it reflected a different understanding of personal space shaped by survival needs. Nighttime routines reinforced cooperation. If embers needed tending, one person might wake briefly to stir them while others slept. In some villages, segmented sleep patterns were common. Families slept for several hours, woke in the middle of the night to pray, talk quietly, or manage the fire, and then returned to sleep. This pattern helped maintain warmth without exhausting fuel supplies. Even architecture supported shared living. Houses were built compactly to encourage collective heat retention. Narrow streets reduced wind exposure. In regions influenced by urban traditions dating back to the Byzantine Empire, clustered housing designs minimized exterior wall exposure, indirectly supporting communal warmth. Marriage and family structures also affected sleeping arrangements. Large families were common not only for labor needs, but because more people meant more shared strength during winter. Children grew accustomed to sleeping in close proximity from a young age. There was also emotional resilience in shared warmth. Long winter nights could feel endless. Darkness came early. Without artificial light, evenings stretched on quietly. Storytelling, songs, and shared rituals made the time meaningful. Emotional closeness likely eased the mental burden of cold and isolation. Community extended beyond the household. In some villages, communal bakehouses or gathering halls provided shared heated spaces during especially harsh weather. These buildings became temporary centers of warmth, where neighbors exchanged news and support. The absence of fireplaces did not mean the absence of heat. It meant heat was distributed differently through bodies, relationships, and shared routines. Warmth was not an individual possession. It was a collective achievement. When winters grew harsher, village heating methods were shaped not only by daily needs, but by larger climate shifts that communities could neither predict nor control. When winters became longer and colder, survival strategies had to evolve. Periods of unusual cold tested every system. Villages relied on architecture, food storage, clothing, fuel supplies, and cooperation. One of the most challenging cold periods in European history was the Little Ice Age. Beginning around the 14th century and lasting into the 19th century, this era brought lower average temperatures, longer winters, and failed harvests across parts of Europe. Rivers that rarely froze began to ice over regularly. In cities like those of England and the Low Countries, winter frost fairs were held on frozen waterways. But for rural villagers, the novelty meant hardship. During this time, villages were forced to increase fuel storage. Wood consumption rose sharply. Forests near settlements were sometimes depleted, forcing families to travel farther for firewood. In regions where peat was available, such as Ireland and Scotland, peat cutting became even more essential. Peat burned slowly and steadily, making it valuable during extended cold spells. In Scandinavia and northern Russia, log house construction became more refined during colder centuries. Walls were built thicker, and gaps between logs were packed tightly with insulating materials. Snow itself was sometimes used intentionally. Packed snow piled against exterior walls acted as an insulating barrier against wind. Extreme winters were not limited to Europe. In East Asia, harsh seasonal shifts during certain centuries affected rural communities under dynasties such as the Ming Dynasty. Agricultural strain increased, and heating efficiency became more important. Heated brick beds and floor systems were improved and expanded. Fuel sources diversified, including the increased use of coal in some northern regions. In Japan, during the colder decades of the Edo period, rural families relied heavily on charcoal. Charcoal was lighter and cleaner burning than raw wood, making it more practical in densely built wooden towns and villages. Special storage methods kept charcoal dry through damp winters. Cold periods also revealed weaknesses in housing. Thatched roofs sometimes collapsed under heavy snow. Villagers adapted by reinforcing roof beams and increasing roof angles in snowy regions. Steeper roofs allowed snow to slide off rather than accumulate dangerously. Food shortages often accompanied severe winters. If autumn harvests failed, families entered winter with limited supplies. Malnutrition reduced the body's ability to generate heat, making cold more dangerous. Communities responded by strengthening storage traditions. Root cellars, dug deep into the earth, protected vegetables from freezing while keeping them edible. Grain stores were carefully sealed to prevent moisture damage. In mountainous areas, avalanches and blocked roads could isolate villages for weeks. In such situations, survival depended entirely on pre-winter preparation. Fuel, preserved meat, dried fish, and stored grain had to last until spring. Firewood stacks were often covered and elevated to keep them dry above snow levels. Some regions experienced volcanic eruptions that intensified cold temporarily. For example, the eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815 led to the year without a summer in 1816. Though affecting global climate patterns, rural communities far from the eruption felt its consequences. Crop failures and unusual frosts forced villages to rely even more heavily on their winter survival techniques. In Central Asia, nomadic groups such as the Mongols adjusted by migrating seasonally to lower altitudes during severe winters. Portable felt yurts were reinforced with extra layers. Herd animals were clustered closely at night to conserve warmth. In parts of the Ottoman territories, during periods of extreme winter, rural villages increased communal cooperation. Under the broader rule of the Ottoman Empire, local governance often allowed villages to manage their own winter preparations. Shared ovens, community grain reserves, and mutual aid systems strengthened resilience. Extreme cold also influenced clothing styles. Fur-lined garments became more widespread. In Russia and Eastern Europe, long sheepskin coats called chalups became winter essentials. Boots were lined with wool or fur. Mittens were preferred over gloves because keeping fingers together conserved heat more effectively. Winter festivals sometimes served a deeper purpose beyond celebration. Midwinter gatherings provided psychological relief and strengthened social bonds. In freezing darkness, maintaining morale was crucial. Shared rituals reinforced unity during hardship. Over time, villages learned from each severe winter. Roof angles were adjusted. Walls were thickened. Fuel storage increased. Heating platforms improved. Knowledge passed from one generation to the next. The absence of fireplaces did not prevent adaptation. Instead, it encouraged innovation rooted in necessity. Cold periods acted as harsh teachers, forcing communities to refine every detail of their survival systems. Warmth in surprising climates. Not all cold nights occurred in snowy landscapes or frozen rivers. Even in regions known for heat, such as parts of Africa, the Middle East, and the Americas, nighttime temperatures could drop dramatically, especially in deserts and highlands. Village families in these areas developed unique strategies to stay warm, often combining clothing, bedding, and architecture in ways adapted to local conditions. In the Sahara and other desert regions of North Africa, temperatures swing widely between day and night. Villages made of mudbrick, such as those influenced by the Mali Empire, took advantage of thick walls to trap daytime heat. During the day, the sun baked the walls, and that warmth slowly radiated back into homes after sunset. Windows and doors were kept small to prevent heat from escaping quickly and to shield interiors from chilling desert winds. Nomadic groups, including the Tuareg, used tents made of heavy woven textiles. Nighttime cold was countered by layered sleeping mats, animal skins, and close sleeping arrangements. Wool and camel hair, widely available in these regions, were ideal for insulating against sudden drops in temperature. Like northern communities, shared warmth among family members was vital. In the Middle East, villages in highlands and semi-arid regions also faced freezing nights, particularly during winter months. Mudbrick houses often included small alcoves where a family could cluster together. Cooking over small indoor fires not only prepared meals, but also provided localized heat. Charcoal and dried dung were used when wood was scarce. The design of multi-purpose rooms allowed families to maximize the warmth generated during evening activities. In the Andes Mountains of South America, indigenous communities lived at high altitudes where temperatures could plummet at night, despite relatively warm days. In regions under the influence of pre-Columbian civilizations, such as the Inca Empire, homes were built from stone, which absorbed daytime heat. Roofs were thatched and tightly sealed to prevent drafts. Families slept on raised platforms covered with layers of straw, alpaca, or llama wool, and blankets. Animals like guinea pigs or llamas were sometimes kept nearby, providing extra warmth. In North America, indigenous peoples in the Great Plains and Southwest faced cold desert nights. In the Southwest, adobe homes with thick walls retained heat absorbed during the day. Villagers used bedding made from woven fibers and animal hides. In the Great Plains, teepees were designed to trap warmth efficiently. Fires built on the ground created rising heat, while smoke escaped through a top opening. The portable nature of teepees allowed families to move seasonally, balancing warmth, resource availability, and shelter. Even in regions with limited tree cover, villagers found innovative solutions. Dried grasses, reeds, and straw were used for insulation, bedding, and draft-proofing. Heated stones were carried inside to beds, and body heat from humans and animals was always a critical factor. Clothing in these regions was adapted for layers. In the Andes, wool from alpacas and llamas provided insulation even when damp from condensation at night. In the Middle East, layered robes and head coverings preserved body heat. Footwear and hand coverings were used in deserts where nights could freeze unexpectedly. Psychological strategies were important as well. Communities gathered together at night to tell stories, sing, and maintain social cohesion. In remote or sparsely populated areas, these shared routines provided warmth, not only physically, but emotionally. Feeling connected made enduring extreme temperatures more manageable. Fuel management remained universal. Even in regions with limited wood, families relied on dung, charcoal, or compressed plant matter to maintain small, steady fires for cooking and heating. Residual heat was stored in stones or the structure of the home itself. Across continents, one lesson emerges. Warmth was a combination of preparation, resourcefulness, and cooperation. Even in deserts, mountains, or semi-arid regions, village families survived freezing nights by understanding the properties of their environment and making the most of every available resource. Rituals, beliefs, and cultural warmth. Surviving cold nights in villages was not just a physical challenge, it was a cultural one. Across the world, communities developed rituals, spiritual practices, and traditions that helped families endure winter months. These practices provided psychological warmth, reinforced social bonds, and in practical terms, often improved survival. In many European villages, midwinter festivals served multiple purposes. Celebrations such as Yule or later Christmas incorporated feasting, storytelling, and communal gatherings. Large meals provided calories for body heat, while the act of gathering collectively ensured shared warmth. Singing, dancing, and storytelling kept people active and emotionally engaged, which helped them cope with long, dark nights. Even if the hearth was modest, collective activity generated heat in both body and spirit. In parts of East Asia, family-centered rituals played a similar role. During periods such as the Han Dynasty, families honored ancestors with evening offerings and prayers. These rituals often took place around the heated brick beds or communal hearths, while the spiritual focus was on remembrance and respect. The physical setting, warm floors, gathered family members, reinforced survival strategies. Shared activity kept households engaged and bodies warm. Indigenous communities in the Americas incorporated storytelling and ceremonial gatherings into their winter practices. In the Andes, rituals honoring the sun and agricultural cycles took place during the coldest months. Villagers gathered indoors or near communal fires, sharing warmth and knowledge. In North American plains and southwestern deserts, winter nights were filled with storytelling around the fire, songs, and dances designed to maintain morale and cohesion. These activities also encouraged movement, generating heat. Even in Africa and the Middle East, night gatherings were common during cold desert months. Extended families often shared small, enclosed spaces, participating in storytelling, music, and practical work like weaving or mending textiles. Spiritual beliefs reinforced cooperation, helping neighbors, maintaining community structures, and following seasonal customs were seen as moral obligations. Psychologically, this provided a sense of safety that literally influenced how people endured cold nights. Children were central to these practices. Winter evenings became opportunities for education, oral history, and cultural transmission. While adults tended fires or prepared food, children listened to elders recount local legends or family history. Sitting close to adults and siblings naturally created microclimates of warmth. Emotional security in these moments supported physiological resilience. Stress reduction helps the body retain heat more effectively. Many traditions incorporated small, practical innovations. For example, in Northern Europe, special blankets or sleeping sacks were reserved for ceremonial gatherings, doubling as functional insulation. In East Asia, family rituals often coincided with preparing and distributing hot food or drink, aligning social cohesion with physical warmth. Religious practices sometimes directly addressed survival. In some communities, prayers or offerings were made for protection against harsh winter storms. While the spiritual aspect cannot be measured physically, the effect of gathering and coordinating efforts around these rituals strengthened preparedness. Shared activity ensured that fuel, food, and bedding were managed collectively. Even simple acts, like lighting candles, provided both warmth and psychological comfort. In regions with limited firewood, small oil lamps in clusters allowed families to gather without over-consuming fuel. Heat from several lamps combined with human proximity contributed meaningfully to indoor temperature. Winter festivals and rituals also reinforced communal knowledge. Elders shared guidance on fuel management, clothing layering, and bed placement. Lessons about insulating doors or storing food safely were passed down in culturally embedded ways, ensuring that practical survival skills were preserved alongside stories and songs. In short, culture became a form of survival technology. Spiritual and social practices ensured warmth, nutrition, and cooperation extended beyond immediate households. Psychological resilience, social bonds, and practical knowledge combined to make the long, cold nights more bearable. Tools, bed warmers, and ingenious devices Village families often supplemented architecture, clothing, and communal strategies with clever tools designed specifically to provide direct warmth during the night. These devices were simple in principle, but remarkably effective, showing how innovation arose from necessity rather than technology. One common solution in Europe was the bed warmer. Typically, a metal pan with a handle was filled with hot embers from the hearth and placed beneath the bed covers. The heat radiated upward, warming blankets and sheets before the family went to sleep. In wealthier households, bed warmers were made of brass or copper, while poorer families improvised with iron or simple clay containers. Care had to be taken to avoid sparks, but the method was highly effective for a few hours of concentrated warmth. Heated stones were another widespread tool. Stones were placed near the fire until they absorbed heat, then wrapped in cloth or straw and moved into beds. The stones released heat slowly, providing comfort through the coldest parts of the night. This practice was common in parts of Northern and Central Europe, Scandinavia, and Asia, including China and Korea. Families learned which types of stones retained warmth longest, often preferring dense river stones or baked bricks. In East Asia, the heated platform or kang system in northern China served a similar purpose on a larger scale. The platform itself was essentially a bed-sized heat reservoir connected to the cooking stove. Hot air and smoke traveled through channels beneath the platform, warming it. Families slept directly on these surfaces with mats and blankets, combining stored heat with body warmth. This created a controlled and consistent source of heat throughout the night. Portable charcoal braziers were popular in Japan during the Edo period. Small, contained charcoal fires could be moved into sleeping areas to provide direct warmth. Charcoal burned steadily with less smoke than wood, making it suitable for indoor use. Families often arranged mats around these braziers, gathering together to benefit from shared heat. Animal body heat was also effectively harnessed as a living device. In Alpine and Eastern European villages, livestock such as cows, goats, or sheep were kept in the lower floors of homes. Their bodies radiated warmth upward, naturally heating the sleeping area above. Smaller animals, like dogs or chickens, sometimes slept near humans, contributing additional heat. Some cultures combined methods. In the Andes, stones were heated during the day and placed under straw bedding, while thick alpaca blankets insulated the sleeping surface. Nomadic peoples in Central Asia wrapped themselves in layers of felt, using small portable stoves or braziers nearby to maintain temperature through the night. Heat storage and insulation worked together to to minimize fuel consumption. Even simple measures made a difference. Heavy curtains around beds created microclimates, reducing heat loss. Warming mats or layers of straw under blankets raised sleepers above cold floors. Hot water vessels or clay pots filled with heated water were sometimes placed near feet or hands for extra warmth. These devices illustrate a central principle. Warmth could be localized and concentrated without the need for constant large fires. By combining physical materials, stored heat, and human ingenuity, villagers made their sleeping areas comfortable enough to survive even the harshest nights. Knowledge of these tools was passed down through generations. Children learned how to heat stones, handle embers safely, and arrange bedding for maximum effect. Families developed routines to ensure warmth lasted through the night without risking fire hazards or exhausting limited fuel supplies. Ultimately, these innovations reveal a key point. Even in the absence of modern fireplaces, heating systems, or electricity, humans could design practical solutions tailored to their environment. Heat was stored, transferred, and shared through materials, animals, and clever devices, demonstrating a deep understanding of physics and survival that was intuitive rather than formalized. The complete system of survival. By the time we reach the final part of this exploration, it becomes clear that village families survived cold nights without fireplaces, not through any single method, but through a complex, integrated system. Each element, architecture, textiles, food, shared sleep, communal traditions, and ingenious tools interacted to create warmth, safety, and resilience. Homes themselves acted as passive heaters. Thick walls made of stone, earth, mudbrick, or logs absorbed sunlight during the day and slowly released it at night. Underground rooms or semi-subterranean homes minimized exposure to wind and freezing air. Compact designs, narrow streets, and strategic placement behind natural windbreaks enhanced these effects. Roofs, floors, and doors were carefully constructed to trap heat and reduce drafts, showing that design was as important as any active heating method. Textiles turned the human body into an efficient heat generator. Wool, fur, and felt insulated sleepers, while layered blankets and straw-filled bedding slowed heat loss. Clothing, including nightcaps, wool socks, and layered garments, ensured that warmth remained close to the body. Even simple acts like wrapping a child in multiple layers or sharing a sleeping platform became critical survival techniques. Food and drink complemented insulation. Calorie-rich meals, slow-digesting grains, fatty meats, and warm liquids generated internal heat. Timing of meals, communal preparation, and winter-specific diets ensured that bodies stayed warm through the coldest hours. Physical activity, chopping wood, tending animals, and completing household tasks added further warmth before bedtime. Shared sleep and communal living amplified these effects. Families slept together, often with children between adults, or even in multi-family dwellings. Body heat accumulated in enclosed spaces, creating microclimates that were far warmer than individual isolation could provide. Animals contributed additional warmth, while cooperative routines for tending embers and fire ensured that heat was maintained safely throughout the night. Rituals, festivals, and cultural practices reinforced these strategies. Storytelling, singing, and shared spiritual observances kept families active, engaged, and psychologically resilient. Emotional warmth, group cohesion, and collective responsibility for survival proved as important as physical heat, showing the deep interconnection between culture and environmental adaptation. Portable tools and ingenious devices allowed heat to be concentrated where it was most needed. Bed warmers, heated stones, clay vessels, and small braziers provided localized warmth, maximizing comfort while conserving scarce fuel. Knowledge of how to use and combine these tools safely was passed from generation to generation, reflecting centuries of practical experience. Even during extreme winters or unusual cold periods, these strategies proved adaptable. Villages increased fuel storage, reinforced homes, thickened walls, and improved bedding techniques. Nomadic communities moved seasonally. Desert villages relied on thick textiles, and highland populations optimized insulation and heat storage. Across continents, from Europe to Asia, Africa to the Americas, families innovated according to their environment. Ultimately, survival without a fireplace was a holistic endeavor. No single element, fire, clothing, food, or architecture, could guarantee warmth on its own. Only by combining these strategies did village families endure long, cold nights. Their survival reflects human ingenuity, adaptability, and the understanding that warmth is not merely a physical condition, but a system maintained through planning, cooperation, and experience. Through centuries of trial and observation, these communities mastered the art of living with cold, creating environments that preserved life, comfort, and social cohesion, even in the harshest conditions. Their methods laid the foundation for later innovations in heating, insulation, and home design, showing that necessity, observation, and human cooperation can overcome even the most formidable natural challenges. Best of luck. Thanks you, viewers.